Taliesin's Treasures 2024 Preview of Current Research. Ness appears to be Vach. She has the same number of Fianna warriors as Saraswati Vach has Marut warriors, 27. Ness, that is Vach or speech, is hard to obtain and is finally mastered by Kavath. She is apprehended in a body of water, as Vach Saraswati is a water goddess. Her consort is Kavath, a teacher druid who also leads a war band, is then Brihaspati in his roles of Vakaspati and Ganapati, Lord of Speech and Lord of the Troop. Kavath has his own band of Fianna and of druids who specifically make incantations in battle. He is the teacher-leader of the incanting priests, aka Brihaspati Ganapati. As such, he is Brihaspati, but by leading a Fianna band, he is Rudra-coded, especially since his brother is Fachtana, that is Rudra, and their grandfather is the higher Rudra Rohita named Ruri Mak Shirigi. So Fachtana and Kavath are like the two brother aspects of this higher Ruri/Rohita, who is the solar Rudra Brihaspati, the red sun. This solar Rudra Brihaspati is also very comparable to Apollo, since Apollo is a solar Rudra Brihaspati. I would guess that Kavath's Welsh parallel is Tegid Fol, consort of Ceridwen, who equals Vach/Ness. Tegid connects him to the Tylwyth Teg, the fair troop, who are alternately called the Tylwyth Gwyn, the Welsh Rudras, who otherwise belong to Gwyn. Thus the name Tegid may suggest once again a role connected obliquely with the troop. Fol, F-O-E-L, means bald, baldness being a mark of the druid/priest type, equals Brihaspati, as it continued to be with monks. I lean toward Ness's father, Yohi Salbuide, Salbuide, horseman Yellowheel, being a higher form of Vishnu, who is reborn as Cuchulainn. The only other specific yellow heel in Indo-European mythology is the Iranic Gandharva. But this Gandharva actually shares the mythos of the other Vishnu types, and thus he is probably a form of Vishnu that the Zoroastrians demonized and gave the coded name Gandharva to. The term has survived in the Iranic Pamir languages, Shugni Zindurv, that is Gandharaba, meaning werewolf, thus matching Fenrir and Cuchulainn, who are both Vishnu types and have wolf or werewolf type forms. Quote, "Who killed the yellow-heeled Gandharva that was rushing with open jaws, eager to destroy the living world of the good principle," unquote, from Yasht 19 of the Avesta. Arno Preiner has convinced me that Typhon parallels the destructive side of Cuchulainn/Vishnu and Fenrir. Upon further investigation, we found numerous parallels shared with Cuchulainn/Vishnu/Fenrir. Typhon has many heads, including dogs, wolves, and lions. He melts everything around him with vapor and fire, as Cuchulainn does. He takes the sinews from and incapacitates the Mithraic god Zeus, as Fenrir/Cuchulainn severs the arm of Tyr/Lugith. But Typhon then is subdued by Zeus, as also occurs in the parallel cases. He is finally weakened by food given by a crone, as also specifically happens to Cuchulainn. He is imprisoned beneath an axis mundi, Mount Etna, as the other parallels are incapacitated or bound to an axis mundi. His terrible devouring jaws are highlighted when he bursts from his imprisonment and returns as the destroyer in the end times, like Fenrir. The Rudra-type god was also demonized by the Zoroastrians, and generally became the hostile god Ahriman, whose sole creation is the peacock, a bird that belongs specifically to Shiva and his son in Hindu tradition. Ahriman's name means something like destructive or hostile, while Rudra is called the destroyer. Odin, a Rudra-type god, kills Ymir in a myth that scholars commonly have noted is very similar to when Ahriman kills Gaiomard. Indeed, Ahriman killing Gaiomard is the parallel of Odin, as they are parallel or the same type gods. Another form of the Rudra type appears to be Azidahaka, or Zahak, who is reminiscent of Balor/Gaul. However, the beneficent side of the Ironic Rudra type survived in the Simurgh bird and the white-haired epic hero he fosters in the wilderness, Zal. Zal parallels Fionn MacCool, while the Simurgh bird parallels Fintan or Finnicus. Also, the word Simurgh in Armenian signifies the peacock, once again, while Simurgh in Indo-Iranic languages signifies the Shaina bird connected to the firebird or eagle. In Sufi poetry, all the birds seek out the Simurgh bird because he is said to be the best and wisest of the birds and to be their king. In the end, they realize the Simurgh was each one of them, or inside each one of them. This is a very Shaivite-like message, surviving into Islamic times and connected directly to the Simurgh. Vishnu, thus demonized as the yellow-heeled Gandharva, and probably also appearing as a wolf form of Ahriman, also survived in Ironic material in a positive form as the epic hero Rostam, whose legend bears clear similarities to Cuchulainn, as scholars have noted. These otherwise demonized gods can survive in these epic heroes in a positive form, dating from a more archaic time, because the epic heroes were under much less pressure to change and be demonized with the Reformation. They could survive in fossilized forms, preserving the original archaic positive aspects of these gods that were demonized in religious contexts. Avirgin, Amairgin, is Shiva. His song is like those of Taliesin, and his role of killing Macgrania matches that of Heinir, helping to split Ymir. His poems are both prophetic and peacemaking, consistent with the Shiva type. Avirgin can thus parallel either Heinir, Shiva, or Odin, Rudra, in his myths, since they are two sides of one deity. Avirgin is presumably son of the smith Ekit, because the smith, that is the Tvashtar type, is really a face of Prajapati, and Prajapati is the father or grandfather of Rudra Shiva, depending on the variant. Depending on whether the seed or Kamamanyu of this Prajapati is personified or left out as a direct manifested god. Thus, Hecate is an aspect of the Prajapati hero that is Conchobar, but this legend has separated them for the sake of the narrative. Conchobar and Hecate are not presented as one and the same god, even though in a larger religious perspective they would be aspects of one god. Since Averhyn parallels Odin/Heinir, Conall Cernach, son of Averhyn, is the parallel of Vali, son of Odin. Not only is Conall the son of Odin's parallel, Averhyn, but like Vali, he is the great avenger. He avenges the killing of Fargus mac Roech, which is a precise mythical parallel of the killing of Balder. Conall is thus not Cernunnos, as some have thought. Ailill mac Mata, who directs a blind poet to throw his spear at Fergus and kill him, is thus the parallel of Loki. As Arno Preiner has pointed out, Ailill and Loki are both given matronymic surnames instead of patronymics, which is unusual and further supports their comparison. Fargus himself is Indra, and so there has been a switch here with this Indra type taking the Balder role in this myth. This may be because the Balder/Aryaman type was absorbed into other gods in Celtic myth, whether Welsh Lle or Gaelic Fargus. We don't seem to see a pure Aryaman/Balder in Celtic myth. Fargus mac Roech, smashing his sword repeatedly into Conchobar's shield and not being able to break it, parallels Thor hammering Skrymir, that is Utgartha Loki, while Fargus mac Leti fighting the water monster the Myrdris of Loch Ruri, and then falling dead after emerging victorious, parallels Thor also falling dead after killing the water serpent Jormungandr. Put together these myths of these two Farguses with that of Turin, and we have a complete Celtic thunderer mythos, very similar to that of Thor. This Fargus/Thor mythos is again paralleled in Britain in the Arthurian knight Sir Kai. Kai is said to drink as much as 4 men from a horn, comparable to Thor and Indra. He is called a great warrior who slays hundreds. He fights an aquatic cat monster, or a fish cat, the Cath Palug, or Shapalu, aka the bog cat, which parallels the Midgarth serpent, or Jormungandr's cat form that Thor wrestles before later killing it. Indeed, Jormungandr has this cat form, thus the aquatic cat in the Welsh version is a coded form of the great serpent. Kai gets offended by and conflicts with the sovereign, that is Arthur, which is one of the Thunderer's central motifs that we see again with Turin versus Lu and Achilles versus Agamemnon. Quote, when Arthur makes a satirical poem about Kai, he grows angry and hostile towards the king, ultimately abandoning the quest and his companions. The narrative tells us that Kai would have nothing to do with Arthur from then on, not when the latter was waning in strength or when his men were being killed. Unquote. This is taken from Wikipedia. Notice how similar this is to Achilles' refusal to fight after being insulted by Agamemnon. Kai is also a hothead in a similar way, and sometimes cruel. you could say stormy. Kai also briefly claims the sword in the stone as his own and declares himself king, before finally giving it back to Arthur. This is a theme we see in the humbling of Indra motif and the Sumerian Ninurta parallel, where the thunderer or warrior tries to become the king of the world, but then gets humbled. Fergus also is temporarily the king before Conchobar, and then gives the kingship over to Conchobar. Kai is called, quote, best worthy to be a knight of the Round Table of any, unquote, and named as one of the 3 battle-diademed men of the island of Britain in the Triads, implying that he is the foremost of Arthur's knights and one of the greatest warriors of all. Kai is the first knight to volunteer to assist Culhwch in his quest, promising to stand by his side until Olwen is found. This is interesting because Culhwch is Pushan, and Indra is the friend and battle partner of Pushan in Rig Vedic hymns. Kai can hold his breath underwater for many days, just like Fergus mac Leti can. Fergus is very tall, and Kai has the epithet Kai the Tall. Kai is said to be able to be the fuel to light fires due to his heat. Could this ability to spark fires be a reference to lightning? Kai is the main knight of Arthur's court who Percival, that is, the equivalent of the Ashvins, has to fight in order to join the knights. Percival defeats Kai. In the Vedic myth, the Ashvins and Chavana fight together and defeat Indra in the parallel conflict, and then are allowed to join the Society of the Higher Gods, equivalent to the knights or court of Arthur. This would then be like Thor being the warrior on the side of the Aesir and fighting Freyr in the Aesir-Vanir War. Thor as Odin's warrior and as Kai is Arthur's warrior. Thus we see a very consistent Celtic thunderer mythos, which has survived between Fergus and Kai in particular. Although Taliesin parallels Finn/Rudra himself from one perspective, since he directly parallels Finn, who is Rudra, it is actually the 2 sons of Shiva that have the closest Hindu parallel to him and his myth. This must be because the sons of Shiva are fragments of Shiva's essence, emanations of himself, and so the myths may shift between father and son in different branches. In the Hindu myth, it is Shiva and Parvati who give the fruit of knowledge to their son Ganesha, who has competed against his brother Kartikeya for it. This fruit has the quality that it cannot be divided, but if it is tasted by one, he must receive all of its knowledge himself. This is the same quality belonging to the liquid of knowledge in Taliesin's tale and the salmon of knowledge in Fion's, and Taliesin also acquires it at the expense of a pseudo-brother, Morfran. This pseudo-brother isn't a match of Kartikeya though, as we will see. Despite closely paralleling Ganesha in this part of the tale, the rebirth of Taliesin bears similarities instead with the birth of Kartikeya. So Shiva, Ganesha, and Kartikeya may all mythically overlap in the case of Taliesin, each one paralleling a part of his myth. Erevan parallels Lothair and Manawyddan in his mythic role when he is named as one of the 3 brothers who kill Macrania, Maccecht, and Macquil. Those 3 together mean the equivalent of Ymir. And thus, Erevan appears to be equivalent to Agni/Mannanan, and possibly linguistically connected to the Odin name Irmin or Jormun. Kuul is the father of Fionn MacCool, and he is Rudra Agni as well. He is the king of the Fianna and parallels the wandering Vratya of the Atharva Veda, who stirs Prajapati to engender Rudra Mahadeva from the gold that is within him. Taig, quote, of the towers, unquote, the maternal grandfather of Fionn, is here the Prajapati, and his daughter, Myrna, is his own feminine aspect, who becomes the womb that carries the Rudra Mahadeva, that is Fionn. Fionn then returns to demand his birthright dominion from Taig, as Rudra returns and demands his birthright dominions from Prajapati. Kul as Rudra Agni is really the progenitive fire that burns within Taig / Prajapati, and thereby engenders Finn with Taig's daughter. Gaul here is the terrible avenging side of the same Rudra Agni deity, who attacks the progenitive act that he has just caused, as Kul, as it also paradoxically happens in the Vedas and Brahmanas. Therefore, what we have with Gaul and Kul is that they are two sides of one deity, who is reborn then as Fionn. So Gaul, Kul, and Fionn are all the same deity, seen from different sides, and Taig is the Prajapati. But the Rudra Agni is within this Prajapati, and it is the burning fiery passion within him that sparks his desire and then is the vector of procreation with his own female aspect, his daughter. Therefore, if you look at Gaul, Kul, Taig, and his daughter Myrna, this is a mythic or folkloric story representing a mystical state of affairs in which all of these god aspects are within one whole. They are all overlapping and indistinguished as yet, but they are interacting with one another in this mystical sense. Myrna is the female aspect within Taig, but Kul is the fiery passion within Taig. This fiery passion, Kul, begins a progenitive process with that daughter. In the Vedas, it is depicted as the rape of the daughter by the Prajapati, but it is really the Rudra Agni within him that is promoting and causing this progenitive act. Therefore, Kul, in this case, in this version, is the one to impregnate Myrna. Gaul, then, is only the other side of that Rudra Agni deity who is Kul. And this is the paradox of Rudra in this myth, is that he engenders, that he causes the act of procreation with the daughter of Prajapati, but then he turns his other face and attacks that act of procreation that he has just caused. That is the mystical paradox at the core of the Vedic myth. And so Gaul, we have Gaul once again turning and attacking Kul, who has just caused the progenitive act, and killing Kul in this case. But this is really an internal reaction caused by the same Rudra Agni deity, turning on himself and what he has just done. This act then gives rise to a rebirth of the Rudra Agni deity within the now divided cosmos, because the attack of Rudra Agni upon himself and the progenitive act that he has caused has burst open the previously integral whole, the undivided whole that they were within, overlapping one another. The procreative act has burst open that whole, and so from that bursting is reborn a new Rudra Agni of the now created world that is divided. And time then begins, and the world then unfolds, as this is the start of the creation. Kamamanyu would be the seed or infant form that grows into Fionn Makul, and thus this version of Finn's birth does not personify Manu separately. Whereas the Sons of Mill version of Averfinn's birth does personify this Manu this overflow of Prajapati distinctly as Galav / Mil or Milesius, Mil España. Galav, that is Manu, is not Kul being Rudra Agni. And these two myths tell the same metaphysical event of Finn's birth, but from two different sides. They then may appear contradictory, but this ability to tell different parts of one metaphysical event in separate variants is the prerogative of myth. The purpose is to bring forward different parts of the theological core in each version. The overall structure is that Rudra Agni, that is Kul, burns within Prajapati, that is Taig or Bila in the other version, as his own progenitive urge. Rudra Agni is within Prajapati. This urge directs itself towards the feminine aspect of Prajapati, i.e. his daughter Myrna. The seed or newborn child that is produced is Kamamanu and can be personified as its own deity, that is Galav, aka Mil in the Sons of Mil version. This child then turns into or gives rise to Rudra Mahadeva, that is Fionn mac Cool or Eivor Finn. So in the Fionn mac Cool version, the Manu, or that is Galav, is present but unstated as the infant form of Fionn, or the embryo or seed form of Fionn. He is there, but he is part and continuous with Fionn. In that sense, Kul is separate from Manu Galav as the fathering Rudra Agni. However, that Galav is indeed continuous with both Rudras, and the title of Manu gets absorbed into Rudra, into the one who is born as Rudra Mahadeva. The Sons of Mil version focuses more on this Manu Galav as his own embodied and personified deity, and as the predecessor of Rudra, that is Finn, Eivor Finn. While the Kul version focuses on the pre-existent Rudra Agni, that is Kul, who is the direct vector of the procreative act, with the Prajapati's daughter, that is Myrna. The birth of Efnisien and Nisien in the Welsh version to Aeroswyth and Penarddun could be a variation of this Kul myth, although it is harder to determine for sure. Aeroswyth, that is Gold Enemy, sounds more like a Rudra than a Manu type, and nothing in Aeroswyth's myth suggests the mythos of Manu either. And Aeroswyth's action of imprisoning the Llŷr, who is the sea, reminds of other enclosing serpents or mountains in Vedic myths, or of certain actions of Rudra types. So if we read Llŷr as representing the celestial ocean, the Gaelic tavarn, or the pleroma of waters and light, then Aeroswyth imprisoning this sea could find its parallel in the primordial Rudra guarding the integrity of the uncreate pleroma, the unbroken totality of sacred liquid and light. Rudra, the pleroma's defender, then paradoxically becomes the vector of procreation with the daughter of Prajapati as the fire of passion within him, as Aeroswyth does with the daughter of Beli, who is Prajapati, and this breaks the integrity of the uncreate that he had guarded. The child born from this event is Rudra Shiva, as in the case of Aeroswyth, the children are Efnisien and Nisien, who are Rudra and Shiva. Jerig Kora is Daksha Prajapati. Daksha Prajapati is an emanation of Prajapati as sacrificer, and this Daksha Prajapati complex is the clearest parallel of Cernunnos, and his myth is so widespread that it even has an Ugaritic version. The Daksha Cernunnos parallels are Gaelic Jerig Cora, Welsh Gwythyr, Vedic Daksha, Hittite Kurunta, Sumerian Namtar, Ugaritic Baal Kurnum Wudnub, Greek Actaeon, the Norse servant that sleeps with Frigg and is killed by Odin in Saxo's account, and the wine that the Roman fauna is killed for becoming enamored of. I will explain this lengthy parallel in more detail later. The sacrifice of the golden calf from the Bible also appears to be from the same root as this Daksha's sacrifice myth. The Don Kulnya fighting Fionvenach is not really the god Don fighting the god Fionn. The names of these bulls do not correspond to their god names, but instead mark them as representing the dark, Don, versus bright, Fionn, halves of the year. Counterintuitively, it is Fionn who represents the dark half of the year, and so the Dawn Kulnya is really Fionn. Fionvenach is really Jerig Cora / Daksha / Kernunos, which the Venach, or horn, part of his name, hints at. So the Dawn killing Fionvenach is the coded sequel to the story of Fionn hunting down Jerig Cora. The Dawn carries the body parts of Fionvenach across the land, and the places where they fall mark sacred sites. Similarly, after Shiva beheads Daksha, he carries the burnt remains of his wife across the land where they fall, and where they fall they mark sacred sites. Gael Glass, Goidelglas, ancestor of the Gaels, is another coded form of Finn/Rudra. His name signifies hunter/woodsman, and his skin turns glass, blue/green, after being bitten and wrapped by a snake and the poison being stopped. This clearly parallels Shiva drinking the halahala poison, the poison being stopped and his throat turning blue. This myth also re-echoes in the fight of Finn against Allen. Allen's power of sleep-inducing music and noxious fire/smoke parallels the halahala poison that Shiva has to neutralize by drinking. Finn absorbs poison from his own spear to keep himself awake to then defeat Allen. The halahala poison may come from the snake Vasuki that Shiva wears around his neck. The other men collapse from the music of Allen, whereas the other devas and asuras collapse from asphyxiation from the halahala poison fumes. Allen is said to come from the same smithy as Fionn's poison spear, so the two are linked, as Boen Sur has pointed out. Similarly, the poison that Shiva ingests and the poison that threatens the world are from the same snake, actually belonging to Shiva. Boen has also convinced me that Partolan is yet another coded version of Finn, with myths echoing his. Thus, Fintan/Tuin, Partolan, and Gael Glass are all masks of the same god Finn, who the Gaels clearly held in high regard. Indwi, who I previously showed was also Finn, appears reborn in the Second Battle of Moytura as Indwi Folt Find, i.e., Indwi the wise white hare. The main god who is wise and white-haired is, of course, Finn/Find himself, and this Indwi seems to be merely reborn out of Delvaith the Purusha, as some other god principles are, such as the wind, the sun, etc. As I've said, the boar of 4 Mile is a reborn Cuchulainn, who is Vishnu, and is described with the identical unique poetic description as Cuchulainn. Oscar kills him by opening his jaws wide and pulling out his entrails, as Vidar kills Fenrir similarly. Oscar, son of Finn, is Vidar, son of Odin, and also parallels Sharabha, Virabhadra, who defeats Narasimha Vishnu. Oscar also parallels Shiva's son Skanda, who binds and kills the wolf son Vrika of Varaha, the boar incarnation of Vishnu. This wolf son of the boar Vishnu should also be treated as an emanation of Vishnu. The death of the boar of 4 Mile is the omen that signals Fion's impending death, similar to how Odin's death is caused by Fenrir during Ragnarok. The Welsh hag Orddu, the Very Black, who is daughter of Olwen, the Very White, seems like a possible Welsh Kali, meaning black. Not only is she daughter, that is emanation, of the Very White, as Kali is emanation of Durga, but Gwyn has to quest to retrieve Orddu's blood, which could be symbolic of an ancient tantric-type ritual connected to Gwyn. A possible Gaelic parallel is the hag Irnon, meaning iron, and her 2 sisters. Despite being terrifying hags, they are yet members of the Tuatha Dé Danann. They paralyze Fionn and his men with a sort of magical weaving spell, suggesting an image very similar to that of Kali standing on the motionless, immobilized body of Shiva. Gaul has to appear and save Fionn by defeating Irnon. Gaul stands for the most terrifying or Ugra side of Fionn, which must be summoned to overcome this Gaelic Kali. In this way, Gaul must parallel a Rudra form such as Mahakala Bhairava or Kalantaka, the one who is greater than time/death, or the one who kills time/death. Only Mahakala Bhairava can subdue Kali. The Hindu corpus has 2 myths in line with this. Goddess Parvati incarnates as Kali to kill a demon. Her anger then takes the form of a child. Kali feeds the infant with her milk. Shiva then merges Kali and the child with him. From this merged form, Kala Bhairava appears. In the second tale, Kali has been summoned to defeat another demon. She then continues on a rampage that threatens the world. Shiva lies down, immobile, in her path, and when she steps on him, she realizes who he is and is stopped in her tracks. Shiva here would parallel both the immobilized Fionn and the victorious Gaul at once, with Mahakala as Shiva's own terrifying inner aspect that is the ultimate match for Kali and stops her in her tracks. Tantric Buddhist tradition also tells how Avalokiteshvara, that is Shiva, realizes that his peaceful methods were too mild to subdue the degenerate beings, so he manifests in a wrathful form to accomplish his compassionate intentions. This form is Mahakala. This again echoes what we see with Gaul, who must be summoned as the more terrifying form to defeat Irnon, as Fionn is frozen in place and cannot do so. Fionn and Gaul confronting Irnon, or Gwyn confronting Orddu, thus suggest that a tantric-like esoteric tradition may have existed from the most archaic times. If a parallel of the tantric Kali existed in Celtic tradition, then it might have existed in other European branches as well. Frau Holda seems like the most likely Germanic parallel, keeping in mind that the Very Black hag, in the Welsh version, emanates from the Very White. Frau Holda is similarly known as both the Dunkel Großmutter, Dark Grandmother, and the Weiße Frau, White Lady, and is a magical weaver, as Irnon and her sisters weave yarn in order to magically paralyze Fionn. Frau Holda is also called Frau Godin, that is Woden, and so Holda presumably is to Frigg, the wife of Odin, as Hecate is to Artemis, the twin of Apollo, with whom Hecate was often equated, or Diana, her equivalent, and as Orwin/Orddu is to Cratelav/Creirwi, and apparently as Irnon is to Sive/Findcam, Similarly, Parvati, wife of Shiva, becomes Kali in some versions of her myth. And so Kali is continuous with Parvati. Preorwi is the daughter of Ceridwen, and positioned like a foster sibling or a pseudo-sibling to Taliesin, while Findcam is daughter of Ness, but also wife of Avarian, who is the parallel of Taliesin. Thus you have a husband and wife, and then a pseudo pair of siblings. This suggests a comparison between Creorwi and Findcam. Likewise, since Finn is husband of Sive, while Averhien is husband of Findcam, this suggests a comparison between Sive and Findcam, and by the same token between Creorwi, pseudo-sibling of Taliesin, and Craithelad, wife of Gwyn. What this is suggesting is that there is a sort of equivalence or gradual flow of emanation between these Gaelic goddess types that is very similar to that between Parvati, the consort of Shiva, and Kali, or Durga Kali, who's emanated from her, and also an equivalence between these and the Vach type goddess, and that in some way they flow or emanate one from the other. The equivalencies or alignments that I'm showing here are quite similar to those that we see in the Hindu Shaivite traditions. In Lady Gregory's version of the tale, Oshin's mother, it is said that, quote, "So great was Finn's love for her, Sive, that he gave up his hunting and all the things he used to take pleasure in, and gave his mind to no other thing but herself." Unquote. Only at last does he return to fighting when Ireland gets attacked. This is very reminiscent of how Shiva famously withdraws from the world to make love to Parvati for a lengthy period. The names of Orwen, mother of Orddu, Olwen, and Ceridwen suggest comparison and possible continuity. This would imply the Welsh Durga/Kali type Orwen/Orddu emerging from the Vach type goddess Ceridwen/Olwen. This might explain why Ness, meaning difficult, who is otherwise Vach, has a similarity or overlap with Durga, meaning difficult to pass, inaccessible, or undefeated. Sive, wife of Finn, is pursued by a demonic wizard, Fair Dorch, the Dark Man, as Parvati is pursued by two different demon kings, Andhaka, meaning he who darkens, and Jalandhara, he who holds water. Sive is turned into a deer by Fair Dorch, while Shiva defeats Andhaka and Jalandhara in the end, but only after battles that last centuries. Considering that the Welsh myth doesn't have a parallel of the Dark Man, it may be worth considering a comparison with the son of Ceridwen, Morfran, meaning sea crow, / Afagdhu, meaning utter darkness. This may be supported by the fact that Andhaka is actually a son of Shiva and Parvati, while Morfran / Afagdhu is a son of Ceridwen and Tegid. This dark man may embody the darkness and blindness that contrasts with the enlightened intellect embodied by Taliesin / Finn, to whom he is opposed. The three brothers, Averfinn, Averhien, and Erevan, rule Ireland after they conquer it. Erevan rules one half, Averfinn rules the other, and Averhien, the peaceful Shiva type, is the peacemaker between them. Ireland here stands for the cosmos, and this is one triple god ruling over it. When Averfinn is killed by Erevan, this is then like Efnisien sacrificing himself into the cauldron of regeneration, or like Rudra castrating himself and retiring from the world, or like Ashvatthama sacrificing himself to Rudra on the fire altar. Erevan is the fire, and Aver Finn is Rudra, and so this killing is really a self-sacrifice, the Rudra going into the fire. Fintan being pursued by the group of enamored women until he turns into a fish and jumps into the water to escape parallels Rudra being pursued by the enamored women in the Deodar forest and castrating himself. Fionn mac Cool is the Fianna leader of Lugaid mac Con, the Purusha. This implies that the Fionn god was seen as the leading power of the Lugaid Purusha in an esoteric sense, perhaps as intellect leads even within the sovereign, or as Rudra is the luminescence within Agni. The entertainment of Bran's severed head on the Isle of Gwales parallels Diarmid and Grania and the Garden of Eden mythos, confirming that Bran is the Yama type, as Diarmid is. The door that they are forbidden to open parallels the forbidden tree that can't be eaten from. And when the door is opened, all the cares of the world return to them, and they have to leave the hall. As with the garden. It is the son of Gwyn, that is Rudra, named Hylin, who opens the door, just as it is the sons of Gaul, who is Rudra, who tempt Diarmid's wife to take the berries of the tree. This confirms that the sons of the Rudra type parallel the serpent of the Garden of Eden. This is supported by the scholarly theory that the serpent from the Garden of Eden may have been a member of God's quote-unquote council. The water octopus that the Dagda defeats is probably equal to Tiamat, as I've said, but this octopus might be a form of the Morrigan, the wife of the Dagda. The Morrigan once takes the form of a snake and also is equated with a Lamia, a serpent monster, in the first mention of the term Morrigan in all of Irish literature, from the manuscript Regina number 215, circa 876 CE. As John Shaw has shown, Danu or Anu is likely another name of the Morrigan, and Danu is the Vedic goddess of abyssal waters and gives birth to the serpents, such as Vritra, as does the Morrigan with Maiki, and as does Tiamat, who also personifies the primordial waters. Tavern, meaning ocean, who is at the beginning of one genealogy of the gods in the Book of Invasions, the LGE, is probably this Tiamat/Morrigan, seen as the primordial celestial feminine or neutral pleroma, the ocean or pleroma that can be male or female or neutral. She takes a form within Mirhevnia, meaning the dark waters, as the octopus therein. This octopus is made to submit by the Dagda, the primordial wind god, and he then becomes the husband of the Morrigan. Bowen points out that this narrative reflects in the idea that the king must tame and give order and truth to the land, who is personified as the Hag of Sovereignty, the sovereignty goddess, and then she becomes his beautiful maiden. The Norse giantess Gjalp, whose name is connected to roar, sea, or wave, and who is listed as one of the 9 mothers of Heimdall, these also probably being waves, is described in one myth as being astride a river and making the river rise with her bodily fluids. Thor throws a rock at her while she is doing this and stops the outflow of liquid. Since Thor has a Vayu/Indra mythos per Dumasil, both a Vayu and Indra mythos combined into Thor, and sometimes parallels the Dagda, who is Vayu, this myth is then similar to when the Morrigan is also found with her legs astride a river, and the Dagda meets and unites with her there, has his tryst with her at that moment. But it is also similar to the Dagda defeating the water octopus and making the water recede in that moment. Thus, this Norse version of the tale brings the Morrigan and octopus motifs together into one event and supports their esoteric equivalency, supports the idea that the octopus is indeed the Morrigan, because it shows this Gjalp embodying both sides of this mythos. If the 9 mothers of Heimdall are the same as the 9 wave daughters of the sea goddess Ran, then Gjalp is a wave daughter of this sea goddess. As such, she may also be an emanation of that goddess, and so Ran, as the sea, could also parallel the Morrigan/Danu as the primordial ocean Tavern, as previously mentioned. Ran is called a prophetess, Spa, as the Morrigan's prophecy is very similar to the prophecy at the end of the Völuspá, is almost the same prophecy. The Völuspá being the prophecy, Spa, of the seeress. Llefelys is not Lle/Mitra, but is instead another name of the Welsh Prajapati. It is Prajapati that Varuna, the equivalent of Llŷ, or Neith, goes to for help when he is fighting the Asuras, as it is Llefelys that Llŷ, the Varuna type, goes to for help in similar fashion in the Welsh myth. Prajapati teaches Varuna magical rites and incantations to defeat these Asuras, as Llefelys does precisely the same for Llŷ. That is, the myth involving Llŷ and Llefelys is really the Varuna type going to the Prajapati type for help. This explains why Cliwellus, Cligueillus, an alternate spelling of Llefelys, is also given as interchangeable with Dunwall Molmud, father of Heli/Belly, Dunwall being the Welsh Brahman. So Cliwellus, Cligueillus, is an alternate name of the father of Belly, alternating with Dunwall. So Cligueillus is an alternate name of the Welsh Brahman. This is understandable because Brahman, Cligueillus, and Brahma or Prajapati names are sometimes interchangeable as well. Brahma being the manifest Brahman, Llefelys being the manifest Cligueillus. Cligueillus, Dunwall Molmud, and Manogan are apparently alternate names of the same Welsh Brahman, who then manifests as Llefelys, that being Brahma or Prajapati. Cligueillus, Dunwall, and Manogan are all alternate names of the father of Belly or Heli, that places them in the position of the Welsh Brahman, the absolute. Belly being the general name for the Prajapati, who is his offspring, but Llefelys also appearing in this Prajapati mythos as the manifest Brahman, who is also Brahma, Prajapati. It gets confusing with all these names, but Llefelys and Belly would be alternate names of the Prajapati Brahma, who is the lower manifestation of Cligueillus, aka Dunwall or Manogan. So you have 2 tiers of variations on these same names, but you can see that Llefelys is then explainable as an alternate spelling of Cligueillus because he is the manifest Brahman, aka Brahma. Llefelys is to Cligueillus as Brahma is to Brahman. and you have these two tiers. The Brahman tier is Cleguelis, Dunwall, or Managan. They manifest in the Prajapati Brahma tier, which is Cephalus, or belly/heli. Once you organize them in this way, it becomes more clear, and it clarifies the fact that Cephalus is not Hle or Mitra. He is part of the Prajapati type. The Kurnosivsky Yamnaya idol appears to have all of the main myths of Prajapati depicted on it, thus supporting the concept of a complete Prajapati type god dating from Proto-Indo-European times, meaning that the different aspects or emanations of Prajapati didn't come together at a later date in only the Vedic material or something like that. Some people like to argue that Prajapati is a conglomeration or a later development of this totality figure with these traits. But the Kurnosivsky Yamnaya idol shows that all of these traits were depicted in one totalizing god as far back as the Yamnaya Proto-Indo-European period. On this Kurnosivsky idol, the world tree, or a tree, is shown as its spine, just like the Prajapati or Brahma type god has the world tree growing out of its head, or it is called the tree of Brahma. It is identified with, the world tree is identified with this Brahma Prajapati type god. Additionally, on this idol, the sun and moon are in its body. It carries the tools of the craftsman, aka the Visvakarman title, the cosmic craftsman. The idol's phallus is prominent, as with the Lord of Generation, which is the meaning of the name Prajapati. Animals are present, Animals are present and very prominent on the front of the idol, as Prajapati creates and feeds the animals, so they are gathered around him. And an act of rape appears on one side of the idol, as Dyaush rapes his own female aspect within the total Prajapati. Also, the turtle appears as an isolated animal, given a special prominence on the idol, and the turtle is the particular emissary and symbol of Prajapati, after the creation from the primordial waters, and plays an important part in his myth. I've also seen the suggestion that horns could be present on the sides of the idol's head, but this appears unclear. I've also seen the suggestion that horns could be present on the sides of the idol's head, but this appears unclear. The Welsh Amaethon, meaning the plowman/laborer, is by far the most likely parallel of the Dagda/Vayu. The Dagda, more than once, is the god who has to clear and work land, laboring for the other gods, and the process of elimination also supports the comparison to Amaethon. Amaethon is the only god who can till a certain field in the tale Culhwch and Olwen, as the Dagda is the only one who can clear the 12 plains for Angus and Mither in the wooing of Aideen, and is the god who is made to labor to dig and build the earthworks under Bress's fort. Ptah appears to be the Egyptian Brahman, or its equivalent, since he contains both the waters of Nun, or non-being, and the Prajapati-type god of the emergent mound, Atum, or being, within himself, and his symbol is the Jed, cosmic pillar, as the pillar is the symbol of both the Brahman, the Skamba pillar, and Breoghan, the tower of Brigantia. Ptah is treated as the higher self of Atum, as Brahman is of Brahma. The question remains whether Ptah is only Brahman, a pure Brahman, or is also comparable to Godhead personalities, such as the craftsman Vishvakarman, or even Shiva as the personality/essence of Brahman. Since clearly Ptah is depicted with features and a persona. Shiva dwells in cemeteries and cremation grounds and covers himself with their substance. the ashes of the dead, until his skin turns white. Perhaps similarly, Ptah is the god associated with the ghoulish form of the dead, as he is the god appearing as a mummy, having covered himself with the substance of the death rite appropriate to the Egyptian culture, as cremation is appropriate to the Hindu. The mummy cloth that wraps Ptah's body can also be seen as the feminine material substance, Prakriti or Shakti, that the essence of the godhead has as its corollary. This image of Ptah wrapped in the cloth can be compared to the concept of Shiva Shakti, Shiva and Shakti as two sides of one coin. Ptah is not truly restricted by the mummy cloth, but still reaches out and holds the symbols of his power, showing that he willingly binds himself with this material substance, going freely into the world as its indwelling essence, even though it is an act of dying into life. This mummy wrap then suggests a kind of Houdini game that Ptah plays, entering the material world willingly and then gradually liberating himself again. This game of Ptah is then also comparable to the Leela or play of Shiva, or the dance of Shiva, the playfulness Shiva engages in, which emanates the world and by which he enters into it as indweller. Finally, if we look at Gale Glass, a Shiva/Finn variant, we see an image somewhat similar to Ptah. While Ptah is a green god wrapped in the constricting material element, Gale Glass is wrapped around his torso and bitten by a constricting snake. Where the snake had constricted, Gale's skin turned the color glass, which can be a green or blue color. We also know that the snake itself is a standard symbol of Shakti and her Kundalini force, and thus the image of Gale wrapped by the snake is reminiscent both of Shiva Shakti and Ptah in his mummy cloth.